I'm Charlie Collins, and today we're going to talk about your life history. So let's start right out by asking your full name, where, and when you were born.
Well, my full name is Arthur Robert Jacobs. I was born in 20 Summer Street, Battle Creek, Michigan, August the 16th, 1921.
Okay. And Art, do you recall much before you went to school? And if so,
I don't know how much is much, but there are some things
sure.
that I remember.
And tell us a little bit about those.
Well, I remember that at the end of my street was a nice lady who was a music teacher. And she gave lessons to my brother Louis and my sister Barbara. And I distinctly remember on occasion them taking me with me as we walked down to what is now Capitol Avenue, used to be Maple Street. And I attended those lessons, which instilled interest in music in me, I think, benign. I did not know it at the time. Didn't live there too long until my father was a motorman on the Battle Creek Streetcar Company, and he wanted to be independent, so they bought a general store in Marengo, Michigan. Marengo it's from Marshall, Michigan to Albion, Michigan, is 12 miles. At the 6-mile point, there's a road that goes down a hill to the right, and at the bottom of the hill is the little village of Marengo. We had the general store there, and I have many memories of when we lived there.
Did you start school there in Marengo then?
Yes, I did. Started school there, country school, and we had to walk a mile back up that hill to the highway and down to the schoolhouse.
Tell us a little bit about the schoolhouse, Art.
Well, it was a nice schoolhouse. It had, it wasn't very old at that time, and it encompassed all the grades, including 8th, I think. But I remember walking there with my sister, and she took my hand on the highway to protect me. And the schoolhouse had a lot of windows around it. It had a nice garage in the back, separate from the building, where we played during the recesses. Annie I Over, I remember that distinctly.
Tell us a little bit about that game.
Well, I remember you use a ball as the object, and you call Annie I Over as you throw it over the roof, and if you catch it on the other side, it constitutes some points. If you drop it, I don't know the exact rules anymore, but I remember throwing that ball. I was too small, I couldn't throw it over, but I used to catch it when it came down off the roof.
Yeah.
I distinctly remember that the schoolhouse had it didn't use outhouses, which was common in those days, but it had an indoor lavatory with a cesspool and what you might call modern stools. And I can remember looking down on occasion into that gaping hole and the water down there about 40 feet below. I can remember that quite distinctly. I remember they had, next to that was a room that was used entirely for stacking wood, which we used to heat the building. My mother became postmaster there at Marengo, and I loved that family store because time I got home from school, I could have ice cream or candy or anything that I wanted. I remember an incident where a man, who I later found out was an alcoholic, didn't know what that meant, but he broke into the store and was in the storage room in the back during the night, and he opened some cans of antifreeze and drank it, which was the last drinking he ever did.
I bet it was.
And that impressed me, and I never forgot that. We used to have dances upstairs. It was a big, large room over the store. We had dances there. I remember being at those dances and going to sleep next to the drummer. I liked the drummer, and he liked me, and he gave me a knife, a pocket knife, which I have to this day.
Really? Well, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. He was from Homer.
Mhm.
I can't remember his name or anything, but he was from Homer. Well, we used to bobsled down that hill in the wintertime. Dad would pull the bobsled up the hill, and then we'd all get on it and slide down.
Let me interrupt just a little bit there. Describe to us what a bobsled is.
Bobsled is a extended sled for sliding down hills. It has a front portion, and it can vary in length, but generally would be 10 to 12 feet long. And on the front, it had runners that were steerable, and on the back was another set of runners, and several people could go down the hill at one time. Because of the weight, it was a very fast vehicle and was fun to
I bet it was.
ride. I also remember there was an Indian family that lived at the top of that hill, and their name I do remember. Their name was Hartong, and one of the Hartong boys was interesting to me because the Kalamazoo River, I believe it was the Kalamazoo River, it couldn't be the Battle Creek River, runs a quarter of a mile from Marengo. We used to be down there, and they had a dam, and this Hartong Indian boy could catch fish coming over that dam with his hands, and I remember that clearly, how he caught those fish, and I can envision him with rubber boots on walking up to that dam where the spillway was, and snaking those fish when they come over. Suckers probably in the spring, I'm not sure. In any event, we eventually my folks sold the store in 1928, and we moved to Battle Creek, back to Battle Creek.
Mm-hmm.
We moved to 50 Glenwood Street, and my father took the money, I assume, I was 6 years old, from the store sale and bought a very well-known, well-established filling station, gas station on Main Street in Battle Creek. He was quite successful at that, but he was trying to get it started. It was a very, very severe winter, and he worked out in the cold day and night, caught a bad cold, and the cold eventually turned to pneumonia, and he passed away at 50 Glenwood Street. Remember the incident, the evening, very clearly. And of course, one shot of penicillin would have cured him, but
Yeah.
penicillin had not been discovered at that time, and so we lost him. And I was 6 years old.
And so you were back in Battle Creek with the filling station that someone had to operate or sell, and you were living with your mother.
Living with my
Did you
mother.
have brothers and sisters?
I had my brother Lou, and my sister Barbara.
That's
Lou.
right.
Barbara passed away here at the Masonic Home this year.
Really?
on St.
Mhm.
Patrick's Day last spring. But yes, Mother sold the filling station, and we then went through a series of moves
Mhm.
from one house to another, and she kept the family together, and right then was 1932 came along, and all
Which was the
money
bottom of the Depression.
yes, and I can remember she got 10 cents on the dollar from Merchants Bank in Battle Creek, which became Security National, and so that wiped out our little nest egg that the family had. My sister was extremely talented in typewriting and shorthand, won a state contest in shorthand. She got a job at Eaton Manufacturing Company. At 17, she was the moneymaker for my mother and I, because my brother Lou married at that same time.
So your brother went off to earn his fortune with his new wife?
Yes, he went.
And your
Strangely
sister?
enough, he went to work for that same bank.
Really?
He became a teller there and was going to work his way up from there.
And so this was about 32?
You know,
And tell us a little bit about that Depression and the experiences that your family had there.
well, of course, being 6 years old, I have little recollection of the hardships we suffered.
Yeah, well, now, at that time, you would have been 11 years old, 12 years old, long in that range.
Yeah.
You were born in 21,
Yeah.
you've been in
About 10 years old,
10
yeah.
years, 10 to 11 years old.
And I remember my mother working as a seamstress
So, and your sister working at Eaton's.
and sister working at Eaton.
Mhm.
My mother was a superb cook, and we never missed a meal, and I always had clothes to wear and a
Well,
stomach full,
That
but
was very important
but
back
it
then.
was difficult,
You
very
bet.
difficult.
So let's take up in 1932. Did you hear of much of what was going on as far as the CCC and the WPA and those
Yes,
particular
I
things?
did, because my brother was on CCC for a while. I distinctly remember the Lindbergh kidnapping
Do you?
because of the boy walking up and down the street in front of our house shouting extra, extra, hear all about it. And I remember that.
Mhm.
I remember the market crash, but it didn't mean anything to me. I didn't know what it was.
Sure.
But we managed to get through and live a fairly comfortable. Of course, we had an Essex car when my father died, and it was new. And I remember my mother sold that. I remember when my brother Lou got married and left the household, he bought a brand new 1932 Ford Model A Roadster with a rumble seat.
Okay.
And I used to ride in the rumble seat a lot. I remember that.
Art, what's a rumble seat?
The rumble seat is similar to a trunk on today's car. The car would be a coupe, so there would be two people riding in the coupe part in the front. And then in the back you could pull this down like you open a trunk, but instead of being a trunk, it opened into a little cavity that contained a nice seat, and you stepped on the bumper, and then they had steps on the rear of the car to step on to step down into that rumble seat. And why they called it rumble, I don't know, but it was a nice thing to have.
Was a fresh air ride? Well, it wasn't.
Yeah, it was a fresh air ride, that's right. And
Well, you know, cars today don't have rumble seats.
no, they don't.
And children and grandchildren probably don't know what they are. But,
Well, they were kind of neat. They simple device, but It put 2 extra people in the vehicle for,
Yeah, that
And you
made
had
the
to
car transport 4 people, didn't it?
right.
Was there any car besides Ford that had a rumble seat on it?
I cannot recall any.
I can't either. Art, during that period, and as the 30s progressed on, did you hear much about what was happening in the world, especially in Europe? Or were you
Well,
aware
because
of
of
it?
my tender age, I think my interests were elsewhere. And I'm sure I was exposed to the news of the day, but it didn't really have much effect on me.
Do you remember when Henry Ford rented that big ship and took a ship around, I think over to England to advocate that the United States should not get into this war that was in Europe?
No, I have no recollection of that.
That happened in the mid to late 30s.
I remember when the Hindenburg exploded and burned.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, of course, we didn't have television or anything like that, but the Hindenburg was was the largest dirigible at that time, and was coming from Germany to the United States, and was supposed to land in New Jersey. Of course, I think it had helium gas in it, and as it connected with its mooring post, the spark ignited the hydrogen, and the whole thing just blew up in an instant and
Just seconds it was gone.
gone,
Yeah.
totally gone. And that was the first real disaster that impressed me, that you can get hurt out there doing
Yeah.
common, ordinary things.
Art, let's see, tell us where you were. You had already graduated from high school by 1940, is that right?
No, that is
No.
not right.
20,
What happened was
31,
that I
49.
quit school
Oh, okay.
because my sister got married. And that left my mother alone. And she had no means of support because she's advancing in years now.
Okay.
And I quit school and went to work.
What year did you quit school then?
Must have been 39.
39.
And then
Yeah.
the war came along,
Yeah.
World War II.
Yeah, and Pearl Harbor happened.
Yeah.
Where were you at when Pearl Harbor
I
happened?
was at a friend's house, Wayne Norman, who's my dearest friend. We've been friends since we were 6 or 7 years old. I was at his house, and I remember it distinctly. The upshot of that was that I knew I was going to be drafted.
Yes.
I didn't want to be drafted, so
You
I
had
just,
been working, though, at that time for a couple of years.
yes,
Where did you work?
Eaton Manufacturing Company
Okay.
in the engineering department. I was in charge of blueprints.
Really? And
Yeah.
so you had done quite well, even though you didn't have a degree
Well,
or a
As you recall, I said that my sister was
mhm.
very good at the work that she did, and she became the secretary of the manager of Eaton Manufacturing,
Okay.
which is was a large
Yeah, so it was a large
valve-making company, an important company because they were making valves for airplanes.
Yeah.
Well, through her influence, I was able to secure this job in the
Mhm.
blueprint, as a blueprint boy. And so what I did was go back to school and took summer school because I hadn't graduated and did not have
A high school
plain and
diploma. Yeah.
solid geometry, which was required to take the test for the Navy Air Corps, which is
Okay.
where I wanted to go. So I went back to school that summer, and all I did was study day and night. I was fortunate because I remember the teacher was Mr. Van Andel. He was a Dutchman, of course, and his son was a Navy pilot. So he looked kindly upon my efforts to achieve some good record there, that I might get into the Naval Air Corps. And I did. I got an A in both plane and solid geometry, and did that in 12 weeks, and still is a record at Battle Creek Central High School. No one has ever taken both geometries and got A's in them in that short a
You
time.
took both at the same time?
Pardon?
Did you take them both
Oh,
at
yeah,
the same time?
yeah. Among something else that
Yeah.
I took too, calculus or something, I don't know what it was. Anyway,
And
as a
so
result of that,
that qualified you to get into the Naval
well,
Air Corps?
first of all, it qualified me for a diploma.
Mm-hmm.
So post-gratis, I got a diploma from Battle Creek Central High School, and that's where the 1940 comes in.
Uh-huh, okay.
Then I took the exam for the Naval Air Corps and passed it. And I'll never forget, on September 30th, 1943, we were called to active duty and assembled at the Wayne Hotel in Detroit. There was 435 cadets assembled there, which I have a picture of that assembly taken from high up in the Wayne Hotel, which has now been demolished. Of the 435 cadets, 32 of them graduated and received their wings, and I was one of them. I was
Well,
very
that was
proud
quite
of
an
that because
accomplishment.
I was in with mostly college
Yes.
kids and well-bred. The main group of that 403 was from Ohio, a few from Indiana, and a few from Michigan. But I was able to compete without any college education. And off I went to become a naval aviator.
And this was 43.
Yes.
So tell us about your first days in the Navy.
First
Where did
days
you
in
go?
the Navy was at Delaware, Ohio, Wesleyan University.
Okay.
I remember they didn't have uniforms for us even yet.
Mm-hmm.
And gradually we got a cap, and we'd get a blouse, and so eventually we got a uniform together. I was 3 months there at Ohio Wesleyan, taking all the academic required subjects for flight and to be an aviator. From there, I was sent to Lewiston, Idaho, to Lewiston State Normal College for continuing education and basic requirements for to prepare to be a pilot in the Navy. The Navy pilot required a lot more education and time than an Army pilot. The reason for that was that a Navy pilot, in the Army, you just pilot the plane.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Navy, because you're flying off from a ship, you're required to be expert at land navigation, over water navigation, and celestial navigation for night maneuvering. You also had to have engine requirements. You had to know what to do. See, in the Army, all that, some other guy took care of that.
That's right.
So you had to be able to be a gunner, a navigator, a pilot, all together. The result of that was, in the Army, at that time, it took 9 months to get your wings. And in the Navy, it took 18 months to get your wings.
Oh,
So at Lewiston State Normal, we did the same as we did at Ohio Westland. Now we're better supplied and more unified and knew our objectives and so forth. From there, I was sent to Livermore, California, United States Naval Air Station. That was my first introduction into flying airplanes.
mhm. Oh, you had.
Oh, no, excuse me. Lewiston State Normal is where I started. And there we had civilian instructors and flew Cubs and things like that.
Okay. So you had some flying experience then.
Yes.
Had you had previous experience before
No.
you got in the Navy
No.
of flying a plane?
Oh, no.
No. So you learned to fly a plane.
They taught me how to fly.
Yeah, good.
But from there, I went to Livermore, to the
Mhm.
Naval Air Station, and there we got into advanced flying and night flying. And we flew Stearmans then, that's the two
Yeah.
biplanes.
Yeah.
And from there, I was sent to Corpus Christi, Texas, second largest naval air station in the United States, and was there for a considerable length of time. And on sometime in July 1944, I received my gold wings as a naval air pilot. One of the 32 out of that 435 that started together. All the rest have been washed out. Washed out referred to being dismissed from the program
Yeah.
for,
Sent to a different program.
yes,
So you was the only one out of the 432 that got your wings?
no,
No.
32 of us
32 of you still.
out of 435.
Yeah, okay. And you got them.
And one of them that I
Okay.
went all the way through with, George Lauder, lives in Cleveland, Ohio. We're still very close, and we communicate by email every week.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I bet you have a lot to talk about when you send your emails.
Oh, yes.
So you received your wings in '44,
Yeah.
and then what happened?
Well, I got a 30-day leave,
Okay.
and that's the first leave I'd had since I entered the program.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you couldn't.
You didn't get too many
No,
time offs, huh?
They don't let you go home.
Mhm. Well, you'd been.
So I came home to Battle Creek and married my school-time girlfriend.
So you got married in 1944.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
July
And now-
30th.
And now you got gold wings and you're a naval air pilot.
And
And
a white
you're-
uniform, a green uniform, and a tan uniform, and I was one hot tamale.
And so what transpired in your life after that? Where did your wife go, and what
Well,
did you do?
I found out later that every assessment made on me by my instructors in flying had a notation on this cadet would make an excellent instructor.
Oh my.
The upshot of that was when we got our wings, and that's when you get your first orders. Opened the orders, and I was to go to Atlanta, Georgia, to attend Instrument Flight Instructors School,
Oh my.
because my instructor that I had for instrument flying, that's where they put you under the hood, and
Yeah.
highly recommended me for that. So my wife went to Atlanta, Georgia with me. We lived off the base, and I completed my instructions there. And then I got my first naval assignment. I was sent to Beeville, Texas. And Beeville was an instrument flight training school for cadets. So all of a sudden, I'm no longer a cadet. I'm an ensign, and I'm teaching cadets instrument flying. We lived in a nice unit, off-base unit there, wonderful place, had great friends, good times, good memories. Oh, there's lots of things I can tell you, but I don't want to run this so long.
You're doing just fine, and keep talking.
Got plenty of tape.
So, from there, I was sent to Waldron Field, Corpus Christi. That's the Advanced Fighter Pilot School.
Oh, my.
And I began to teach advanced fighting tactics, gunnery, dive bombing, navigation, night flying. And in this type of setup now, you are assigned a unit. In other words, you have 6 or 12 cadets that come under your wing, and you take them step by step through all the training required to get their wings. And I was very good at being an instructor, I admit that. And I know that because I became the oldest instructor at Waldron Field in time and did nothing but check flights, weather flights, and I was the oldest one there in time. Well, there's lots of stories that could take hours telling about what happened at Corpus Christi with all these.
Well, let's start.
Well, I just want to tell you what happened then.
Sure.
Eventually, I'd been there, my tour of duty had
Yes, your 4 years.
expired, yes. I got my papers, my orders to report to Seattle, Washington to go aboard the Saratoga
Oh, my.
out in the Pacific. So I sent my dear wife Catherine home to Battle Creek. I moved into bachelor quarters and awaited the fateful day. 2 days before I was to leave for Seattle, they had something called D-Day in Europe, which changed everything for everybody, and my orders were canceled. So I continued to live in the bachelor quarters and to train cadets. It was just a little while later, in July, I think, or August, I got orders a second time to report to Seattle to go to sea. Ironically, 2 days before I was to leave for Seattle, they dropped something called an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. My orders were immediately canceled again. So I never did actually get out to sea. Although I was on discharge paid overseas bonus because of the hundreds of flights I had taken, cadets, way beyond the continental limits of the United States, down to Aruba, the Caribbean. So if you served outside the continental limits at any time in any way, you were entitled to overseas pay. So it wasn't long until it was all over, and I was not discharged. Because in the Navy, they would not discharge any certified pilot. What happened was that it cost, they told us, it cost $80,000 for every pilot that received these wings in the Navy.
Mhm.
They were reluctant to release that. So what they did, the only branch of service that did, we received a certificate called Release from Active Duty Certificate, which meant I was not on active duty anymore, but I wasn't unhooked from the Navy anymore, and Navy Reserve training participation was required. So I returned home to Battle Creek, and my reserve training was taken at Grosse Ile, Michigan. That's the island out in the
Mhm.
Detroit River. And I became what you probably remember as a weekend warrior.
Yes.
So I forget whether it's every other week, I think it's every other weekend, in Battle Creek we had the unit at Kellogg Field in Battle Creek. We would take, they would come over with a PBY, the big amphibious boat
Mhm.
from Grosse Ile. Pick up 10 of us pilots in Battle Creek, fly over to Grosse Ile, land, and the 10 pilots would pick up 10 airplanes that was assigned to them, bring them back to Battle Creek, and train Friday evening, Saturday, Sunday, and Sunday afternoon. We all took the planes back. The PBY brought us back to Battle Creek and returned to Grosse Ile. I did that for years. I was there a long time, became executive officer of that unit, which is the second in command.
Mhm.
And I flew a lot of nice airplanes in my own hometown. And got in trouble once or twice.
Well, we got to hear about some of your experiences that was not directly related to what you should do in the Navy. You must have gotten into trouble once or twice. So let's have a few of those stories. Make this a little
Well,
bit
you know,
personal.
Flying an airplane is kind of like riding a motorcycle. The more you do it, the more you think you can do it.
Yes.
The result of which you could become careless. I remember one event very distinctly. Well, in the meantime, I had taken a job as a district manager over the state of Ohio and had moved from Battle Creek to Fremont, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And I would come home on that weekend that, of course, we're working towards our
Yeah.
oh, you know, when they pay you
Yeah.
after
Yeah.
free service, how many years of service and stuff. So we were home this weekend from Ohio, and I had a flight that I was scheduled for, and I had a seaman with me in the back. I knew him pretty well. Well, this was on the 4th of July. And in Battle Creek, maybe you're aware of Bailey Park,
Yes.
they had a huge affair going on there, thousands of people. Well, just half a block from Bailey Park was where my father-in-law and mother-in-law lived, and that's where we were staying. My wife and daughter and son were there.
Okay.
So On the way back, we unfortunately flew rather close to Bailey Park, and this guy taunted me a little bit. Let's go down and take a look. So I did. He said, gee, he's talking to me on the radio. He says, well, Lieutenant Simpson got a lot lower than that, Art. He says, that's the best you can do?
Oh,
Shouldn't have done that.
I shouldn't have said that.
So, here's Bailey Park. And here's the house where
Yeah.
which I'd already buzzed, and now they're out looking up. Down here, rolled it over and went right across Bailey Park like that and rolled it out. Shouldn't have done that.
No. Did anybody get the numbers off your plane?
Oh, yes. State police. So I flew around a while, and then we went out to Kellogg Field and landed. It's quite a hope. From the parking area of the plane up to the barracks, quite a little distance. And a warm, nice, hot July day, of course. A lot of guys sitting on the outside drinking Coke and throwing frisbees and stuff. So Seaman and I were walking up there, and I noticed, guy kept leaving, leaving. Time I got up there, was none of them were there. The only one there
Only one there was.
was the CEO, who was a personal dear friend of mine. He says, Art, see you in the office. And I knew then I was in big trouble.
Oops.
So the state police picked up my number. They had me for flying over below 1,500 feet and over a congested area. They had me for doing acrobatics over a congested area. They had me for doing acrobatics in a commercial flight lane, and that's where the planes came in. They had me on 5 counts.
Oh.
And he talked to me, he says, I'd like to help you, Art, if I can. He says, there's nothing I can do. The state police have got your number. And there's nothing I can do about that. I said, I don't expect you to. I know that was incorrect, what I did. I'm ready to take my punishment. Well, he said, you're going to have to go over to the tower. And I forget what, but the the FAA
Yeah.
guy was up in there. He says, you have to go and report to him. I'll never forget that. I think it's about the 3rd floor up there. And it's outdoor stairs.
Yeah.
I'm walking up there. I'm going back to Ohio and I'll never come back here. So we got to talking and stuff. He says, Art, where are you from? Where do you live? I says, Fremont, Ohio, sir. Fremont, Ohio? Well, hell, Art, that's where I live. I said, are you kidding me? He said, no. So we started talking about Fremont, Ohio. And we had quite a serious man-to-man talk. To sum it all up in the end, he says, Art, will you lay your hand on this naval regulation book and swear that in your lifetime you will never do what you did today again? I did. You're dismissed, Lieutenant Jacobs. Yeah, I made lieutenant by then.
Yeah.
I was second in command.
Uh-huh.
So that was one incident, and I kept my word. I never
Did that again.
did that again. No.
Your wife would probably killed you.
Oh, listen, she's out. My in-laws,
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
they're all
and the
out
kids,
there
they're all
watching.
out in the front yard, and I'm zapping them, see. And my son, who was about 5, I guess he was, Daddy, that's my, and his mother, my wife said, no, that's not your daddy, that's some other, you know. Because the neighbors are out, everybody's out, because I just, and he said, that's my daddy, and she said, no, that, yeah.
And then when you got home,
Yeah, that was a hard one to live down. But it was a good lesson.
yeah, it sure was, wasn't it?
It was. It brought me to my senses. You know, there's old pilots and there's bold pilots.
Mhm.
But there are no old, bold pilots.
Yes.
That's true.
So I continued there until 1954. And then because of reduction in force and no money with the government and so forth, the reserve weekend warrior program was abolished.
Mhm.
I was 2 years from getting my muster out pay, and at that time they gave us, in the meantime, the mustering out pay was what was after.
Yes.
The government, I hate to say it, I always thought most of the guys that were right up close to getting it were discharged.
Yeah.
So they gave me a discharge from the Navy, and I never did get any retirement pay.
Is that right?
Yeah. But it was a great experience. I personally think that every male, at some time or other, if he could serve the country and the service, that he would be a better man for it. Because the Navy really straightened me out. There was some pathways I was taking that was detrimental to my future, and the Navy really made a man out of me, and I'm always grateful for that.
Well, you was connected with the Navy at a minimum then of 14 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Still have a soft spot in my heart for the
So what was your final rank?
full lieutenant.
Full lieutenant?
Now, the full lieutenant in the Navy is equivalent to a captain in the Army.
Yes.
But when I got my discharge, they always reduce it one rank.
Oh, really?
So I came out as a second lieutenant. in
Why did they do that?
some regulation of theirs.
Mhm. Well, Art, another interesting part of your life has been, you've been involved in masonry for many years. So
Oh, yes.
when did you first join the lodge?
I was 27 years old, and if you read the article, The Bedford Connection, in the Front Porch magazine, published by this institution, it tells all about it. But I had a very dear friend and belonged to Battle Creek Lodge, and in our association together, he often talked about the Masons, which I knew nothing of.
Mm-hmm.
And said it would be a good thing to consider joining the Masons. So I did. But in those days, they had territorial jurisdiction,
Yes.
and you could not join a lodge of your choice. You had to join the lodge that's in
In your
whose
territory.
jurisdiction you were in.
Well, you were in the service then, were you not? Weren't you in the Navy?
No,
then?
I just got out.
You got out at 27?
No, it had been 2-3 years there.
Yeah.
I got out, I would think I was,
You was,
I got out in 45.
yeah, you was in the reserves though.
Yeah, I was in the reserves till
Reserves when you
54,
joined,
yeah.
You was in the reserves when you joined the lodge.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So every other weekend you was gone
Well,
when you joined the lodge.
yeah, but that was not much interference,
No,
as
I'm
long
sure.
as I lived in Battle Creek,
Right.
which was most of the time. It was only about a year there that I participated from Fremont. You know, it's a long time ago. It's
Isn't it
hard
though?
for me to remember.
Art,
Anyway, I
you joined the Battle Creek Lodge first.
No, I couldn't,
Oh,
because
okay.
I lived at Mill Lake. Mill Lake is north of Bedford.
Really?
That's why I belong at Bedford.
You joined Bedford then?
I had to,
Okay.
but I didn't know anybody at Bedford.
Bet you do now.
Oh, listen, I worked at AB Stove Company. I was an inspector there, about a week. So I had to find someone who belonged to Bedford Lodge. And someone there told me that Roy Bowman was an active member, and to consult with him, which I did. And he was, excuse me, delighted to help me. Got Leland Bundy to sign the petition with him. That's how I got into Bedford Lodge. And Roy Bowman, a very dear friend, because he was with me all the time as I went through the 3 degrees, and I would go to his farm, not near Dowling, and we would go over my lessons and talk masonry and stuff. And then as the years went by, AB Stove Company closed, and that's when I moved to Ohio.
Okay.
And I lost track of Roy. But every time, as I went through masonry and joined the Scottish Rite, was very active in Scottish Rite in Grand Rapids, I was continually going up and down M37 and going right through Dowling. And every time I passed that corner, you know, I'd look
You'd
over
think
to
about
Katie and say, I wonder whatever happened to Roy Bowman. I wonder whatever happened to Roy Bowman. Years went by, 40, 50 years went by. Never did hear anything. One day I'm sitting in the lobby here in this institution, reading the Morning Sun. And there's a big article about a centurion that has moved into the home with his wife. His name is Roy Bowman. I said, can't be the Roy, 103 years old. Can't be the Roy Bowman I know. So I read the article and get over onto the second page. It's Roy Bowman, formerly of Dowling, Michigan.
It's getting close, isn't it?
Finally at the end saying, member of Bedford Lodge.
Wow.
I could not believe it. I went to the desk and got the number of his room, walked down, knocked on the door, opened the door, and there sat my mentor, Roy Bowman, 103 years old.
I bet that was a day, wasn't it?
Never
Small
forget it.
world.
Brought us together.
Yeah.
And of course, he'd moved to Florida, on with the company first to Atlanta or something, and then retired into Florida, kept his membership up, and came here.
So you eventually joined the Scottish Rite.
Oh yes, I became very, very influenced by Scottish Rite. Went through the chairs, which took 10 years.
In the Scottish Rite.
Yeah, became Commander-in-Chief of Grand Rapids.
Okay.
And received my 33rd degree in 1980.
And did
Cleveland,
you ever-
Ohio, on the very stage where Jack Kennedy and someone else had the debate.
Oh, really? Did you ever go through the York Rite?
Oh yes,
Oh, yeah.
sure. I'm a charter member of Bedford chapter
91.
and council, and been commander of Battle Creek Commandery twice.
Twice. Okay.
Big job.
Yes.
And I was invited to join the Red Cross of Constantine, which is probably one of my very favorite bodies. Became puissant sovereign of that. And I belong to everything else, life member of the Eastern Star, and all that.
And the shrine.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Salad and Temple, yeah. So I've
What
had
did
60 years of masonry.
What did your wife do all the time that you was in service?
That I was in, she was with me a lot of the time.
She never worked or anything?
Oh yeah, Not so much when we was in service, but when we came home.
What did she do?
She was she run a line justifying machine at Wolverine Federal Insurance Company. It's a big machine that you type into, and it makes it come out, if you know how to run it.
Yeah.
Comes out exactly even on both sides, you know, to make a column.
Oh, my goodness.
Then she went into nursing, became a nursing aide, and worked at the Fort Custer with the kids. She's a natural born caretaker.
Yeah. Did you have any children?
Had a boy and a girl.
Are they still alive?
Oh yes. I have a daughter, Jodine. And Jody lives in Chandler, Arizona. And I have a son, John, who lives in Columbia, Missouri.
So they kind of moved out of the state.
Yes, they did. They're both very, very successful.
Grandchildren?
Grandchildren 4, great-grandchildren 10.
Well.
Active
start-
grandchildren.
Started to explode a little bit there, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's see, Art, you've enjoyed a lot of years as a Navy man and many years as a Mason.
Yes,
When did you decide to come up to the Masonic pathways?
well, all my life I've been interested in music and interested in carpentry. I had every tool, I guess, Sears ever made for home use. I had a beautiful home in Battle Creek.
Mm-hmm.
It was large, kids were gone, and then I had 3 heart attacks, which really changed things around. I retired, I was in the camera business, you know,
Mhm.
and I retired in 1985, and 2 years later he had a heart attack, and a year later another one, and 3 years later after that another one. And the upshot of all this was, long in the latter 90s, couldn't do the things I used to do. I'm a very finicky, precise person. I want everything, my tools, are
Right in the right place.
right where they're supposed to be, never laying on the bench,
Nice and
never
sharp.
left on the job. Everything is like that. Same, unfortunately. My stocks go in this drawer right here, the underwear is right here, the hank, you know. Well,
Okay.
so I couldn't do all that. I was a state director for Sheriff Goslin
Okay, for,
in Ohio. They had 10 branches down there, which I took care of. So I couldn't roof anymore, I couldn't build anything much anymore. And it just kept crowding me more and more. The leaves, the storm windows, you know the story.
yep, I sure do.
Ultimately, we come up here and took a look at this place and said, this has got to be, we're being pushed right in here. It didn't seem like we was making any decision. It seemed like something was
Yeah.
making decisions for us. 1999, I moved here. It was the best move we ever made in our life. This place is, you know, I wouldn't think of living anywhere else,
Is that right?
right? It's
Well,
just,
there's everything here for you, isn't there?
oh, it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's the best. Yeah, we're not rated in the top 25, not in Michigan,
In the world,
United States.
United States.
This is a super place to live when you're ambulatory and can enjoy it. If you're over in nursing and aren't aware of what's going on, it's not all that jazzy.
Well, it's because of your health at that point, not because of the facility.
That's right. So I live in one of the homes over here, and it's just wonderful. Made tremendous friends here, and busy here, but now I'm down to where I developed diabetes, which everybody does after 80, and it's slowed me down a whole lot.
Art, one question that quite often we try to slide in on the end is, how do you feel the service that you spent for the country and in the Navy influenced the rest of your life?
It influenced my life greatly because it taught me sound principles of good living. The Navy is, and I'm sure the Army and the Air Corps, if you go in with the right attitude, can benefit you endlessly for the rest of your life. Because you learn what life is really, truly all about and how to manage problems that you're going to have to face as you get older and older. Because in spite of what they say about the twilight years, it doesn't get easier, it gets more difficult. And with the right attitude and an understanding of life and what it's all about, you can cope so much better. And I am grateful to the Navy and to the Masonic Order for that part of my life, which I would not have been able to handle as well if I'd not been in those.
Yeah, well, simultaneously, the principles of Masonry and the good principles of the servitude and service actually parallel each other, don't they?
Absolutely. The lessons and teachings of Masonry are, without any doubt whatever, a solution to good living, having a good life on earth, if you can live up to it.
Well, Art, it's been a real pleasure to talk with a brother Mason that's from the same council that I am.
Yes, indeed.
And it's
That's
been
a
fun.
pleasure for me. It made it a lot easier for me. I feel more at ease having someone who...
And let me tell you that probably sometime in the future, a lot about the Depression.
Well, I was pretty small.
Yeah, well, 8 plus,
Well,
8 to 38, 28 to 38,
my mother
29 to 38.
just lost my father in 28,
Yeah.
Christmas of 28.
Oh, really? My grandfather died in 29, so we're
So
a generation apart, aren't we?
I was pretty small then and
Yeah.
engaged in school. That was my main thing. My mother went to work and kept the family, my sister and I, together. Brother for 1 year, and then he got married.
Carol,
What?
why don't you start the camera?
I've already started it.
Oh, okay, that's a good girl. So we're talking to Art Jacobs today. Art was born in 1921, and we want to reminisce a little bit about the early years and actually things that he saw in his lifetime that our grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren will never have the opportunity to see and to look at and to hear. So Art, let's just kind of back up again and start over and tell us what you know about the Roaring '20s. Anything?
Well, they weren't roaring for me. Excuse me. I lived with my mother and my sister. She had a good job in those days when jobs weren't good and weren't plentiful. She kept us going. My mother worked as a seamstress. She was very good at needlework. And I was just growing up, so I was playing a lot of basketball, soccer, and baseball.
So Art,
Went to M.J. Kellogg School in Battle Creek.
let me interrupt a little bit. And you said your mother worked as a seamstress. Did she work at home, or did she work for a company?
She worked both. She worked
Okay.
for a company, and then she did a lot of the work at home too.
So
She
even,
was good at working with fur,
okay,
and so there wasn't a lot of needle people like her around that did fur work. And in those days, there was no bad effect from wearing furs. People didn't look down on that, they looked up at it.
yes.
As a consequence, there was a lot of fur work to be done, and she was very steadily employed.
Well, good, and obviously, she wasn't a party girl, so
No,
she, you didn't know a lot about what was going on as far as what they called the Roaring Twenties was
no, I
concerned.
didn't, because, and she never dated after Dad died, and she never remarried, so
Now, your father died in 1928, is that right?
1928 Christmas, yes.
Mhm.
I was 6 years old.
Yeah,
So I
so
don't
that, so things got a
remember a
little
lot
tougher
about
then.
him, except I never will forget in those days, the body was not received and guests received at the funeral home. That was done at your own home. And at our home, we had 2 living rooms. One was a formal living room with the doors that pulled shut, and it was shut most of the time. And we had the living room that we used every day. And I remember my father was displayed in that front living room.
In that formal living room.
Yes, I don't remember much about him, but I do remember this. My uncle was there. My name is Arthur Robert. My uncle's name is David Arthur, so that's where I got the Arthur.
Mhm.
He was there. And I remember very clearly and distinctly, he'd taken me into the living room where the casket was. I was not tall enough to look over this side. I'll never remember him, I'll always remember him picking me up so I could see my father laying there. Don't remember much about him, but I distinctly remember his hands crossed, and he had that big Masonic ring on. And that's always stuck with me. It was a beautiful ring, and I didn't know what it meant or anything, but I remember that, and more than I remember looking at him.
Sure. Well, Art, you were rather young, in fact, you're 6 years old then. And so, tell us if you recall anything or the hoopla that went on when the stock market crashed and what happened.
Yes, that was
in
a severe blow to my
1929.
mother because we was with the, I think it was called in those days, Security National Bank in Battle Creek. We got 10 cents on a dollar. Pretty much wiped us out. I remember a couple things about my father. Prohibition was in effect.
Yeah,
And I remember him making home brew in the basement.
okay.
And he had a capping machine down there. And he would make this beer and pour it off, and he let me pull the handle to
Cap the beer.
cap the beer. I remember that distinctly.
Yeah,
And I remember him having friends that visited, sitting in the kitchen and drinking that beer. They poured it out into tall, narrow beer glasses. The unusual thing was, I remember him taking an egg, cracking it, and putting it in there on his beer. And he drank his beer with a raw egg in it, which was a terrible thing to do, not healthy at all, and risky. But we didn't know it in those days, or he didn't know it. And I can remember him doing that.
well, the eggs weren't as bad those days as they are now, Art.
Perhaps not.
Well, they didn't have as much salmonella and things around. It's kind of
But he never
progressed.
got sick from it, so I guess it was all right.
Well, it was supposed to be healthy. So you do recall that in '29, your mother had money in the bank, and the bank didn't pay back very much,
Well,
10% really of what
They
she
didn't
had.
pay
in
back
there.
very much, and they didn't pay back very fast. I remember going to the bank on several occasions in the long lines, and you couldn't get your money anyway.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was very difficult. And I remember the Hindenburg crashed.
Tell us about it, as much as you can remember about that and the Hindenburg. What was the Hindenburg?
The Hindenburg was the largest lighter-than-air ship ever built by the Germans. It was on a tour from Germany to New York.
Mhm.
And it had a mooring post in New Jersey, and came across the ocean fine, down within 20 feet of hooking onto the mooring post, and it burst into flame. And not just a little, the whole thing went at once. Way up, a couple 100 feet up. All the people killed. Terrible. I also remember the headline for the kidnapping the Lindbergh baby,
Mhm.
and the Hoffmans, and the trial. I was small, so it wasn't very meaningful, but I can remember.
Yeah.
I can remember mainly the guys walking up and down in front of the house and having these newspapers shouting, "Extra, extra, read all about it."
Yeah.
That's the way they used to get the news out in those days, is to
Yeah.
actually print out an extra paper, and then the paper boys would go up and down the streets yelling extra.
Yep, and I lived just down the street from the Hart Hotel. Well, it wasn't the Hart Hotel, it was Kellogg Hotel. And I was a baseball fan, and I remember when the Detroit Tigers came to Battle Creek to play. And in the evening, after the meal, they came out on a warm evening and sat out on the sidewalk. They had a beautiful sidewalk, terrazzo sidewalk, which was pretty fancy in those days. And they were sitting out there in the chairs. I was on roller skates, I remember that. I got to see Goose Goslin, Charlie Garrington,
A bunch of the old timers.
the old timers.
Yeah. Did you happen to get their autograph?
No, never occurred to me to get an autograph. I didn't see where that would be anything, but perhaps I should have.
You got to talk to them though.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What'd they say? Anything that you
Oh,
remember?
they just talked baseball.
Uh-huh.
And I remember, I don't know which pitcher it was, but I asked him how to throw a curveball, and he showed me there how to hold the ball.
He did.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was fun back then. That was a,
Nothing but fun.
That was a high point of a young man's life, was to get to talk to these baseball players.
I had a buddy that lived 2 houses down from me, and his last name was Cole, C-O-L-E. And I remember my first experience with the evils of tobacco. We played together every day, and he had a big mulberry tree in the back of his yard, in the back of his house in the yard. And we used that extensively, climbed in it every day. And I remember this one day, he got this plug tobacco out of the house from, I don't know, whoever was chewing in there. Hard bar. And we got up in that tree, and we thought that would be just the ticket, so I bit off a piece of it and chewed it. Wow. And all of a sudden, my head began to spin like that, and I fell out of the tree.
You fell right
Yeah,
out.
oh yeah. And
Did you hurt yourself?
no, didn't hurt myself. I wasn't too high,
Yeah.
but let me tell you, that was the last chew of tobacco I ever took. The first and the last.
Did you swallow it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I might have swallowed it. I didn't know you. That was a crazy thing to do, but you know what kids do.
Oh yeah. Well, they had to check that tobacco out because they saw the big guys doing that.
And in my backyard, we used to play a lot. And one of the things we did was stick hockey, and we didn't have a puck. And of course, we wasn't on ice either, but we run, you know.
Mhm.
I remember we had a carnation can, empty can of carnation milk, which was the puck. And I can remember charging that puck, and my opponent charging. We swung our sticks together like that, and that can went right straight up. It hit me right there,
Right there in the teeth. Huh?
broke that tooth right off.
Oh, my
Is that still the
goodness.
same one?
what's left of it.
Yeah, really.
So I remember that quite clearly.
So you carried that hole in your teeth there all your lifetime, haven't you?
Well, it used to be up a lot higher, but it's worn down.
Yeah.
So
That's interesting.
That's how I got that way. That tin can boy really smacked that thing. So I had a typical childhood growing up time.
Well, tell us about the cars back then.
Well, I told you
When did you
before
see
that
your first car?
My brother, we had an Essex when my dad died, and of course my mother didn't drive. And a year later, my brother got married, and he worked for the coach company in Battle Creek, drove buses, which was strange because my father was a motorman when Battle Creek was served by streetcars. And then my brother became a bus driver for the city. And traveled the same routes, only a different method. And,
When did the streetcars disappear from Battle Creek?
they disappeared about 35 to 40.
35,
Yeah.
So your brother was a streetcar driver, a bus driver.
Bus driver,
in the city of Battle
Battle
Creek.
Creek Bus Company.
And
yeah.
that was the new technology taking over
Oh,
at
yeah.
that time.
That was a big step. Tell you one little incident. My father, by trade, was a blacksmith. He was a very good blacksmith. And he loved horses, and he had a lot of horses. And I know he was a sulky driver. And,
Sure.
he used to go to all the fairs, and he'd drive sulky. He owned a half-brother to Dan Patch. I remember that. Dan Patch, the greatest trot horse ever was.
Really?
Yeah.
And
And,
the horse that your dad owned was a half brother.
Half brother to that, yes. And he
Lost our train of
lost my
thought there.
train of thought there.
Well, we
Some-
banging the doors.
Some lady came in.
Yeah.
So, I was going to tell you, he had blacksmith shops in Leonidas and Vicksburg.
Where's Leonidas?
Leonidas is 25 miles straight south of Battle Creek.
It was or is?
Is.
Okay,
Is
I've
was.
never heard that.
Well, Leonidas is not very big.
Uh-huh.
He had a blacksmith shop there, but he had this blacksmith shop in Vicksburg.
Okay.
And that was a pretty good sized town. That's just south of
Yeah.
Kalamazoo. And one day, a guy came in, two guys came in there. They were from Ford Motor Company. And they talked to my dad about converting the horseshoe business into a Ford repair service. Unfortunately, my father was adamantly adverse to automobiles because of the nature of his work and being a horseman. He didn't like automobiles.
Didn't think so.
And he had a nice place that would convert it to a very nice repair station, and they would train him how to do it. He turned it down. And they offered him stock
And Ford Motor Company.
in Ford Motor Company. And we have often sat around the Christmas table jabbering about past things that were interesting, and one thing was, I wonder where our family would be if he'd have bought just 5 shares
Ford
of
Motor
the original Ford Motor Company stock.
Yeah, right.
But because he didn't like automobiles and see him coming in and replacing horses, he turned them down flat. So that never came to pass.
That's interesting.
Well, I've got a lot of interesting things in my past.
Yeah, well, keep it up.
Well, my great-great-great-grandmother was a rather famous lady, came from England, an accomplished pianist, and I think I told you when Jenny Lind Barnum and Bailey, when he brought Jenny Lind to tour the United States for his first time, they had a contest or something. And my great-great-grandmother participated in that and won it and became the accompanist for Jenny Lind, the Swedish nightingale, and traveled all over the United States. On her first tour of the United States, she toured here twice. She was a devout spiritualist, and she opened a spiritualist school and camp in Vicksburg, which is still operating, summer camp.
Really?
She,
That is your great-grandmother?
yes,
Okay. What was her name?
her name was Laura Whiting Jacobs. She had a whole bunch of things after her name. She was the first doctor, female doctor, graduated from wherever it was. She was a doctor, but she never studied and became a doctor to treat patients. Her great concern was her family, and she wanted to learn how to, when things happened to her children and her family, she could take care of them. She became rather renowned through her music and played concerts for 3 different presidents in the White House. Lincoln, Garfield, and another one. And she must have, she was very close to Mrs. Lincoln.
Okay.
And eventually she became the spiritual advisor to Abraham.
Really?
Yeah, and she advised him not to go to the Fourth Theater that night.
No kidding.
This is, I don't have any proof of this.
Sure, this is what's
the
been
family, what we talked about.
Family history,
Yeah,
yes.
when we had a reunion, you know.
Uh-huh.
The madam was a renowned person. Well, now the madam was strict. And she had 2 sons, Charlie and Louis. They were both in the Civil War and decorated. Charlie was, I finally found out he was a bugler in some regiment from Indiana. And both of them were discharged and re-enlisted and were discharged again on medical terms. That's how my one great-grandfather had a pension. That's how he got it, was from that Civil War, which went to my grandmother. In any event,
So your grandmother got a pension?
my grandmother did, yes,
Your grandmother got a pension from these men?
from the government.
Yeah.
Yeah. Started out at $8 a month and ended up at $35 a month. That's all in my family tree. It tells what year, and
Does it?
I have
Yeah.
all that. But the interesting thing was,
Hello, Mojo.
this friend, this son, Charlie,
Yes.
should I continue?
Yeah, just wait just a second now. Get rid of this telephone noise. Styles is where I want to go. Okay. Change.
So Charlie, the youngest son, was a bit of a rogue after the Civil War.
Okay.
And I have all the papers on this, so I know it's a fact. Charlie wrote some checks on his mother, who we will call Madam Jacobs. She was called Madam, not from house of ill repute, but because she had a doctorate.
She had a-
and, you
she had a
know,
title.
Title. She prosecuted him.
Okay, now Charlie was her son or her grandson?
Son.
Her son.
And I have the papers from the courthouse in Kalamazoo and everything that happened, who the lawyers were. I have all that
Really?
information.
That's very interesting.
Now,
isn't it?
Charlie was convicted, of course, and they sent him to Jackson Prison. And Charlie was so incensed and so upset with his mother couldn't stand it. And what he did was gather stick matches. He used to have matches that were 3 inches, 2 inches long, with a head on the end, and he scratched the head and sulfur ignited the wood. Charlie cut off all the heads of those matches till he had a big handful. And one night he ingested them. And he died in Jackson Prison at the stroke of 12. I've got the date and everything.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Goodness.
Unbelievable. Well,
So he
now his
committed suicide by swallowing all those match heads.
sulfur.
Sulfur, yeah.
Now his brother was named Lewis.
Mhm.
That's my father's name too. There's 3 Lewis. This other son of the madam,
Mhm.
my father, and my brother. They're all Lewis. Lewis Edward, Lewis Howard, and so on.
So there was 3 Lewises down then. So Madam was a great-great-grandmother, and then the first man Lewis down would have been her son,
That's right.
and the next Lewis down would have been his son,
Which
the
was
next Lewis down would have been his son, and that was your father.
my father. So Lewis Howard was as I said, a world, not a World War, but a Civil War veteran
Mhm.
of some renown. He did some good things. He was a good man, but he was a newspaper man, and he owned the newspaper in Vicksburg called The Union, of which I have probably the only surviving copy of that newspaper
Of the Union
in the world.
newspaper.
Yeah, out of Vicksburg. He was a renowned speaker and went all over the state speaking to groups. And if I have any ability at all in leanings towards that, coupled with my voice, I would have to contribute it to Lewis Edward Jacobs,
That was your grandfather,
great-grandfather.
great-grandfather.
So that was kind of interesting.
Yes, very interesting.
Charlie and Edward were the only offsprings of the madam. Now, we don't know anything about her husband much. We think his name was Joseph, but it could have been John. We think he was of the Jewish faith, because people always told him he wore a yarmulke on his head,
Mhm.
so we know that he had leanings towards the Jewish faith. We think he came from England also, and then we think they met in New York and went to New Orleans, and it is reputed that Joseph owned the island. Now, dig this. He owned the island of Galveston, Texas.
Really?
That's the story. But the story kept coming down, and when it got to my father, he had a sister, Frances, my aunt. They put money to, each of them put in so much money. They hired a lawyer in Battle Creek and sent him to New Orleans and Galveston to look this up, to see if the Jacobs had any kind of a claim whatever to that island. Now, we not only missed out on Ford Motor Company, but think what that would be worth.
Kind of was a story missing out, weren't you?
Yes, indeed. It's
Never found out about that though.
Murphy's Law.
Or did you
We
find out?
found out that after he got down there, he was this lawyer. He was quite a party guy,
Mhm.
and he met a sweet young thing down there, which captured him. They took off for California with all the money that my folks had given, and we never heard from them again.
Oh. There's a lot of stories background there, isn't there?
Yeah. So that's some of the cute little stories out of my background that I remember being handed down as the years went by.
Sure. Well, now let's get back to the 30s and tell me. Of course, you were just going to school at that time, so a lot of things kind of
Right.
wasn't very important to you.
I was active in sports, and that's all that. Now, you remember that we started out after my dad died with my brother, my sister, and I, and my mother taking
Yes.
care of us. Then my brother got married, and the years went by, and my sister wanted to get married, and eventually, 1938, I think she got married. So I had to take care of my mother now.
So you were taking care of Mom in 1938,
That's right. So I
so you were,
I went to work.
so you were what, 16?
Right.
Yeah,
That's what I was.
you were 16. And you didn't finish high school then, did you?
I went
At
up,
that time.
up through the 11th grade, and then the war came.
Yeah.
And I wanted, no, I hadn't finished high school because I had to work, take care of my mother.
Quit and went to
Remember
work.
my
Where did
sister-
you work, Art?
Well, my sister had this, she was the executive secretary to Elwin, I can remember his name, Elwin Dyer. He was the general manager of Eaton Manufacturing Company in Battle Creek, huge valve company.
Yep.
And she got me a job, really, there, and I worked in the engineering department. I was in charge of blueprinting. And, but when the war come, I didn't want to be drafted. Thought I would be. I should have known better. I didn't think they would take me on account of sole support from my mother.
Mhm.
But I couldn't join the Air Corps without, I couldn't pass the exam without a diploma and a certain amount of credits in geometry and dirt.
Mhm.
So I went back to school at some school, went through that and got my diploma from Battle Creek High School. And now my sister's been married for a few years, so she and her husband were willing to take Mother back to live with them because they had this child.
Yeah, then Mother could babysit.
Mother took care of the child and run the house.
Yeah.
They both worked. And,
That was a little unique back there until the war started. Then, of course, the women began to take jobs and to go to work. But your sister already was working as
Well,
a
good job.
secretary.
you know, very good job.
Well, that was kind of weird back then that you couldn't join the Air Force unless you had a diploma?
Not if you wanted to go through flight school.
Oh, really?
Oh, no.
I didn't realize that.
Oh, no, you had to have a certain amount of credits in math, geography, all the things pertaining to
Is
flight.
the Air Force the only one that you couldn't?
Well, I went into the Navy Air Force,
Uh-huh.
not the Army.
But anybody who was a pilot had to have a diploma?
Oh, my, yeah, sure.
I didn't think that went into
High
effect
school
until
or
quite a bit
college?
later.
High school.
High school. Did you have to have any college credits? Just had to,
But when
had to
I
have.
told you about that before, where there were
Yes.
436
Yes.
of us, 36 graduated with wings, and I was one of them, and I was in there, and most of the guys had college credits that I went through.
Huh.
Well, now forget the fact that we've already had an interview, Art. and because there are many people will watch this particular reminiscing that may not see your oral history. So,
Fill in the
kind of,
blanks.
don't tell me you told me that before, because then they're gonna have to try to find out oral history.
Well, during the war, right after the war, my mother passed away. She died she was 63 years old. And I never, in my lifetime, ever saw her in bed sick.
Is that right? Even up
She
to,
went just like that. The interesting part of that story is this. She was taking care of Barbara Ann, my niece, my sister's child,
Mhm.
and running the house for them. And Barbara Ann was 18 months old, I think. Mother had, in the kitchen, we had a large round table, oak table like they used to have. She had gone into the kitchen put towels on the kitchen, on the table, put a big dish pan of water on the table.
Give the baby a
And
bath.
she was bathing the baby. My sister and her husband, he was a purchasing agent at Post Cereals. They came home at 5:30, after 5:30, when they come in, she was dead on the floor,
And where was the baby?
on the table.
On the table.
The doctor, what's the guy that comes out and pronounces?
Coroner.
The coroner said she died right around 4 o'clock.
They came home at 5.
Well, 5:30.
And that baby stayed on the
So
table?
baby stayed-
Around 2 hours, that baby was on that table
Never fell off.
and never came off it.
Never heard of that.
Wow,
My
that's
grandmother.
amazing.
Mm-mm-mm.
So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, very definitely.
You never know who's taking care of who.
Yeah, sure don't.
And,
Now, this was after the Second World War.
yes, came home, when I got my wings and graduated in Corpus Christi, I came home on 30-day leave. First leave I'd had.
Mhm.
I married my high school sweetheart, Catherine. And, I told you that I became an instructor.
Yes, for the Navy.
Yeah. And I was at Waldron Field at Corpus Christi, the big advanced fighter pilot school. And I told you all that before. How I got the offer from Brazil.
Yeah.
So,
Well, all right, let's go back and talk a little bit about the 30s and the mechanical things, the telephones, the radios, the cars, and how you would travel in the wintertime.
well, we didn't have cars in my family. There were cars, but we had no car.
So how did you travel?
We traveled by bus,
Travel by bus.
train. We had friends that had cars, but we didn't go much.
Did you travel out before you went into the Navy? Did you travel out of the state of Michigan, do you think?
Oh boy, unfortunately I did. At 16, I was in the 9th grade, going to WK. And I run away from home.
Oh,
Everybody does it.
Went to California on freight trains.
you rode the freight trains out there. Well, now tell us a little bit about those experiences. That has to be something. So you,
First thing I did was learn how the other half lives.
I bet,
It was during the Depression,
yes.
and well, it was coming out of it.
Mhm.
I went to Kalamazoo, and on the west side of Kalamazoo is a long grade, going about a 5-mile grade going up, and the trains are very slow, 15 miles an hour going up that grade. And I went down to that and just kept going and ended up in California. I worked a little bit as I went along.
So
I
did you,
lived in hobo camps, met a lot of character. I was gone about 8 months, I came back home.
so during that 8 months, did you travel the rails much?
All the time.
All the time? So you lived
I
in-
was the night that the San Francisco Golden, not the Golden Gate, the big bridge from San Francisco to Oakland,
Yeah,
that was opened in 1936.
and you were there.
I was laying under the bridge on one end on them bunks. That's where I slept that night. And I can remember those airplanes come with a streamer and fire. It's a thing towing something that was all on fire,
Uh-huh.
and they were in formation, and they went under the bridge. And I can clearly remember that sight. It was at night.
I bet it was a sight. And you were supposedly in there sleeping.
Yeah, that's where I bunked up that night on the bridge with some other fellas.
But did you meet any guys in that 8 months of travel that you formed any friendships or relationships with?
None other than the fellow I went with, who was my brother's wife's cousin.
Okay.
And he was slightly older than me, and he had come back to Battle Creek to visit her, and was going back, and he told some of the tales of
How great it was.
how great it was, you know. I said, boy, I'd love to do that, you know. And so he said, well, you can go with me if you want to. Because he knew how to go, what line to take.
Yeah. So the two of you jumped on the train, on a grade going uphill, and went to California.
Yep,
Yeah.
sure did.
So how did you eat?
How did we eat?
Yeah.
Well, we worked a lot.
Did you? You'd stop along the way and work?
Yep. And work wasn't easy to get.
No, I bet not.
But we, remember washing windows in a hotel. We'd go and get day-old bread
Mhm.
and donuts, no charge. We'd beg for those. Go to a bakery in the morning, they give you yesterday's.
They give you this day-old stuff.
Yeah. And somehow or other,
So you didn't take one train all the way out there.
Oh,
You'd,
no.
you'd stop along the way,
Oh,
get
yeah,
off, and
yeah, it probably took 2 or 3 weeks to get there.
oh my. So in reality, it took you quite a long time to get out to California.
Yep. I remember picking oranges and eating them. Big navels. Went to Hollywood, got some autographs of a few people. And
So you'd gotten old enough to think that autographs were worth something at that time,
well,
huh?
obviously I did, yes.
Did you meet any other young kids? on the
Oh,
road?
yeah.
A lot
That
of
was the days of the
runaways?
Of the
riding freight
hobos,
train.
of traveling on the train, traveling on the rails.
Hmm.
I've seen trains come into Fresno, California. Sitting on top, there was a solid people from the caboose to the engine. Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh,
And
it's
so
a little
stop
late
the
now.
camera, Carol.
Okay,
Now since have you started the camera?
yeah.
Okay. Now we gotta get back on our train of thought, which
Well, I
was-
can remember
we was riding
when
the
I was on the
trains.
road, there was a lot of talk about Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He was president.
Yeah,
Yeah, I came back, went back to school, and strangely enough, I was quite a celebrity in high school.
because
Really?
That's Sergeant Jacobs.
yeah.
He ran away and went to California. They looked up to me for some reason.
Really?
I don't know why.
You done something they wanted to do, probably.
Probably.
Oh boy, we got more noises than we got brains, haven't we? That's okay. Hey, it's quiet for a change. Well, Art, tell us about some of the guys you met and things that happened while you was being a regular professional hobo and riding the rails. You know, that's not, you can't do that anymore.
Well, I found out that sometimes reading colorful articles or books on adventure, that if you participated and did the adventure that you're reading about, that the color somewhat would fade. It's, I don't know what possessed me to do that. I I had the most loving home environment you could have. It was just to seek the adventure of doing it. And 16, I thought I knew probably about all there was to know, and didn't need any more education. And I knew I was always right, and so I took this little trip out there. But I was glad to get back home and to get back into the groove again. I had a lot of
let's talk a
adventures.
little-
That was a long time ago, and
You
I
bet.
have difficulty remembering.
Do you remember what your mother said when you came home and the kind of reception you
I
had?
was the prodigal son.
Really?
Oh, yes.
She killed a fatted calf, did she?
Oh, yes, she did.
She wasn't mad?
She and my sister was just overwhelmed. Pardon?
She wasn't mad?
No.
Had you gotten in touch with her all the time he was gone? Oh, okay.
I wrote her,
Wrote her letters, dear Mom,
I'm okay.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
Well, good.
So, it was just
Yeah.
typical stuff that happens when
Yeah.
you're on the road catching. One time, you know, they have, you know what a reefer is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a refrigerated car.
A refrigerated
Yeah,
car, and the way they refrigerated them is on each end they had things that opened on the top, and they put the chute, and the ice would go in there. That's,
Okay.
but I almost died from getting in one that was empty, and they put in something, it had fruit in it, and they'd put in something to kill the dioxide, I forget what it was, but I remember that. When they pulled me out of there, I couldn't make it on my own.
Really?
Yeah. And
So did they take you to the hospital then, or did
No.
you just sit
No,
around
no.
and come to?
no, they wasn't going to spend any money on me. But I was in Southern California, and it was warm,
Mm-hmm.
and occasionally I'd sleep in the hotel.
Do you ever wonder? Do you ever wonder what would happen if you got sick?
Not at 16.
Never thought about that.
Hmm.
But it was it changed my way of thinking about life.
You bet.
Yeah.
Well, that and then your experiences in the Navy as a Navy pilot.
The Navy turned me around.
Yeah.
I became a man in the Navy, and I have great respect and fond memories of the Navy, because that's where they taught me how to be a man, and I've been on the straight and narrow ever since. Of course, masonry played its share.
That's just what I was going to say. Let's talk a little bit about you joining the lodge. And yeah, I know. That's okay. It's Christmas time, you know.
Yep. Well, I had that vision of my father's ring in the casket stuck with me all my life. I had a very dear friend in Battle Creek that belonged to the Masons. He used to talk to me about it. And he said, you really ought to look into it, Art. So I did, but in those days, lodges had jurisdiction.
Yes.
And I lived in the jurisdiction of Bedford, because I had a year-round home at Mill Lake,
Mm-hmm.
a little north of Bedford. And I got a petition, and I didn't know anybody at the lodge. Did I tell you that story?
Yeah. Well, keep going.
And this friend said, well, we both worked at the A.B. Stove Company. He said, Roy Bowman out there, he was a foreman. He said, he's an active member of Bedford. Let's see if he'll help us. So we went and talked to him, and he was just happy to help us. And filled out my petition. He got another member from the A.B. Stove Company of Bedford to sign it. And that's how I got into Bedford. I told you a story about meeting him
Yes.
60 years later here at the
Here at the home.
Masonic home.
Yeah. They So you, what year was it then that you was raised a Master Mason?
1948,
1948. So you've been
November
around-
3rd, my mother's birthday.
Oh, really? That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I went through in 2 months, and no one had ever done that before. I took my entered apprentice degree, learned my work, came back the following week
Mm-hmm.
for the fellowcraft degree. No one had ever done that.
No, that was hard back then. That was
Oh,
a
that
lot
was a
of
full, you had to give the
a lot of-
full,
yeah, the full catechism.
yes.
You bet.
So I got my second degree then. The following week, they had their third degree, and I came back again. They sent me home because one of the ancient rules and regulations was you could not have the first, second, and third degree in one lunar month.
That's right.
So the following month, I came back, took my third degree, and no one's ever done that since.
I had a similar experience in 1959. I took my 3 degrees in just outside of 30 days.
Yeah.
And
At
For-
Bedford?
no, in Linden, Michigan.
Oh,
And the reason being that the lodge had said that they would participate and take a candidate to Flint to the Morning Star Lodge. They were having a big Master Mason's degree, and they were going to try to raise 12 men in one Saturday. And so my petition came in, 2 months before that, and so the brothers were really anxious for me to get through all the degrees and learn my
that's a nice
learn my
experience.
lessons so that
Wonderful.
I could get in and they could participate in the Master Mason's degree in Flint and the Morning Star Lodge,
Yep.
which I did. And
That's great.
the month later, I went back to lodge and gave my Master Mason's proficiency.
Yeah, got our little
Yeah.
card.
Oh yeah, so I still have that proficiency card, and I bet you do too.
Yeah, somewhere. I never threw it out, I know
Well, that's one of the things that, digressing a little bit, that's one of the things that I think that you have a great ability to do, and that is this, the sound of your voice is a really good, deep,
that. Yeah, I've been blessed with pretty good speaking voice.
yeah, it's a really good, deep voice.
And I've never, ever, I do all the Masonic work, I can do any of it.
I bet you can.
I never had anyone come up to me afterwards and say, "Art, that was really great what you did, but I couldn't hear you." No one ever said that to me.
Me either.
So then I joined Scottish Rite, and that really grabbed me. That became my love. And I got in line at Scottish Rite in Grand Rapids, 10 years to go through the line.
Mm-hmm.
Became Commander-in-Chief, and got my 33rd degree. And then I went through York Rite, and I didn't do anything with chapter and council, but I was commander as a commander
Mm-hmm.
2 different
2 different times.
years. At Battle Creek, which is a big commandery, and it's a real tough job to be commander there. And I did that twice. Then I Red Cross of Constantine, which is my favorite body. That's by invitation only.
Mm-hmm.
And I became Puissant Sovereign. There's a nice title.
Yep.
Puissant Sovereign of the Red Cross of Constantine. And I always enjoyed that very much. So I've had a lot of Masons. Life member of almost everything. Eastern Star. I'm still active downtown here.
How many times was you patron of the Stars?
Never been patron
Never
of the
been patron.
The reason for that is I always, my daughter joined Bedford,
Mhm.
and we always used to say, well, when Jody gets to be member, she can get in line, and I'll go be her patron with us who's there. And unfortunately, she moved to Phoenix, Arizona, and she was very active in Rainbow. She was worthy advisor, and went all over the state. I took her everywhere, but we never made it through the Eastern Star.
Never made it
That's
through.
when she moved away, I was so disappointed, and I just lost interest in going through and becoming patron. I should have.
Did she continue to be active in the Stars in Arizona?
No,
No, she kind of dropped out.
no, she didn't drop out, but she was active.
She isn't active,
Yeah.
well, yeah.
She's a pretty busy girl.
Yeah, I bet.
She's
Well,
got-
Art, it's really been a pleasure to reminisce with you. See, you thought that you didn't have anything to tell us, and my goodness, we've
Oh.
talked and talked and talked and talked.
Yeah, well,
It's, you know,
84
so
years
many
is a lot of
things.
living, you
You
know.
bet, so many things, our future generations will not know about. And so these recordings is what that's for.
Well, when I went to work for Sheriff Gosling Company. You know who they
A
are.
roofing company, yes.
Roofing siding company. They're a big company.
Yeah.
People have no idea how big it is. Well, they have 10 branches in Ohio, and they have 10 branches in Indiana, and they've got 12 in Michigan. It's big.
Yeah,
And I went to work for them and learned the business and became the manager for Ohio, for the state of Ohio.
okay.
So I moved to Fremont, Ohio in 1949, and the only reason I'm telling you is we rented a house down there where the people had gone somewhere, I forget where it was. Texas, they had to be there for 8 years or something. Anyway, we rented the house like it was. And that was the first color television that we ever had. And I can remember that so clearly. It was about that big.
Yeah,
But it was a big set.
yeah, but the tube was small.
Tube was about that big. And we had a lot of great experiences living in Fremont, Ohio. And I was down there for quite a long time.
Were you?
Made a lot of money. But I was gone from Monday morning to Saturday afternoon.
Traveling the state to managing these
Yeah.
10,
Exactly. And when I come home, they bring Jody, that's my daughter, John, my son, and Katie would say, "Now, I want you to meet your father here. This is..." So after several years of that, I had to make a decision. Was it going to be the family or was it going to
Sure.
be the job? And I opted for the job, for the family, and I moved back here to Battle Creek. So,
that was quite an experience there though, wasn't it?
oh, that was a huge experience, yes. And a lot. Remember, I told you of this class of 436.
Yes.
So many of them, 2/3 of them were from Ohio, and I still communicate with friends that flew with me in the Navy from Ohio.
From Ohio,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then I moved down there.
Yeah.
And it was great. We had a good experience down there.
Did any of your buddies that was in the Navy with you live in Fremont?
No,
No, so you didn't really,
Cleveland
Cleveland,
was
yeah.
the closest.
Mhm.
That's about an hour's drive.
Yeah.
It was a good job, a lot of traveling, but the money was really quite good in those days.
You had to think about that too.
Oh, yeah. I've had some opportunities in my lifetime. I don't know why I didn't end up more successful than I did, but if you're gonna base success on money and stuff, that's one thing. But otherwise, I've had a very successful life.
Very
Well,
full
you don't
life.
base success on money, you
No.
know that.
A lot of people do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't. I can't.
Boy, are we successful.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't base it on money, we're really successful.
Okay, sweetie.
Then I got in the camera business, and I was in
Okay, yeah, I guess we did talk about that.